Episode 1. The first dream wasn't mine. A saved virgin sleeps soundly. But I hadn't slept in weeks. Not since the dreams began, if they even were dreams. Each night, I awoke with the same scent under my fingernails, ashen roses. My sheets soaked in sweat, my breath caught between a sob and a prayer. And in the mirror, always a feather. Not white, not dove, but gray burnt at the tips. And every morning, I'd find it lying across my pillow like a warning from something that used to be holy. I was raised in St. Alicia's convent, tucked between the forgotten hills and a cemetery that grew faster than the town. We were taught never to question what the Lord allowed us to remember. But I was remembering things no virgin should know. I was remembering sins that had never been mine. It started on the 12th night. The voice came through the dream like broken glass wrapped in honey. She remembers me, even as I fall. A burning field, a screaming sky, a wing torn from bone, and a mano, something more ancient than man, looking straight into me with golden, bleeding eyes that had seen heaven and been thrown from it. His voice lived in my skull now, and his memory as she sinspilled into mine. By day, I was Sister Alina, quiet, obedient, the Virgin of St. Alicia. They called me pure. They kissed my knuckles like relics. But inside, a war was unfolding. He came again in the 13th dream, whispering, I didn't fall. I was pushed, and they made you forget what you were. I woke up screaming, blood in my mouth, blood on the sheets, the feather still warm where it lay. That day, Mother Priscilla locked the chapel doors. The sisters thought I was possessed, but possession feels like invasion. This felt intimate, like a truth too sharp to swallow, like I had known him once, loved him once. But how could that be? I had never loved a man. I had never even touched one, until the night he touched my inside the dream. Not with lust, but with grief, a grief so old, it had turned holy. He showed me his fall. He showed me what heaven did to those who disobeyed silence. And I remembered, not all, just the first sin. He didn't fall because he hated God. He fell because he loved something more. May. Episode 2. The confession the church tore from the scriptures. The second sin wasn't whispered. It screamed. It began in the middle of morning mass, when the incense turned to smoke, and the crucifix above the altar bled from the eyes. No one else saw it, not even when I stood, trembling, and walked straight down the aisle as if dragged by some invisible tether. They say God speaks through silence, but what if silence is where he buries the screams? Behind the altar, hidden in a slot within the marble wall, I found something no nun should touch. A parchment, dried, wrinkled, and still warm. It wasn't made of paper, it was skin, and the ink was blood. I didn't read it at first. I didn't need to. The moment my fingers grazed the surface, the dream took me. Not a dream, an memory, not mine. They called me Seraph once, before I spoke the name that wasn't allowed. He was there again, the angel who burned in my sleep. But now I saw the fire wasn't punishment. It was branding. The name he spoke, it wasn't God's. It was mine. They erased your name from the gospel, ripped your chapter from scripture, because you were the reminder that angels could love. I fell to my knees, body convulsing, not from fear, from remembering. The parchment pulsed in my hand like a living wound, and I began to see pieces, a hand touching a flame that didn't burn, a kiss exchanged beneath a weeping sky, a vow whispered between a divine and the doomed. I had been part of a covenant long before I was born into flesh. The church called it blasphemy. They called it heresy, but it was older than the church. And now, it was waking up inside me. Mother Priscilla found me hours later, curled beneath the altar, blood on my lips, scripture in my grip. She slapped me hard. You will not speak of what was never written, she hissed, or you remember what they did to the last virgin who saw heaven without dying. But it was too late. I remembered, and heaven remembered me. Episode 3. The feather that bled in the holy water. The third sinner I did, dawn quiet, elegant, and unforgiving. I had gone to the fountain to wash the blood from my hands. The convent bell hadn't rung yet, and St. Alicia's was still half asleep, save for the ravens circling the steeple like they were waiting for someone to die. As I dipped my fingers into the basin of holy water, a feather rose. It didn't float. It bled. A thick ribbon of crimson unfurled from the shaft, blooming in the basin like a curse. I stumbled back, but the water clung to, mysticky, iron sweet, alive. They anointed you in silence, his voice said, because heaven feared what would happen if you remembered out loud. I looked down. The feather hand vanished. It was pressed against my palm, wet, pulsing. Then the chapel bell tolled, and something inside me cracked open. Mass began, but I wasn't in the pew. I was standing outside the confessional, listening. Someone was inside, whispering. A woman. I touched her, just once. I thought it was God I feared, but it was her. Her eyes, her silence, her memory. I pressed my ear closer. I knew that voice. Sister Miriam. She had been the first to teach me how to pray. The one who told me angels had no mouths because they only speak in fire. But now she was sobbing. I saw her touch the water. She cried, and it wept red, like the angel bled for her again. The curtain flew open. She saw me. She screamed. The priest inside the booth didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes were made of glass. No one believed me when I said he was already dead. No one except the raven that landed on the crucifix outside, dragging a chain of white rosary beads in its beak. I picked them up. The metal burned. On the silver cross, etched beneath the surface, were words no nun should read. This is not her first life. Episode 4. The nun who tried to burn my memory out. It was the smell that woke, sweet, sharp, and wrong, like lavender soaked in gasoline. I opened my eyes to find the room flickering. Candlelight danced on the walls, but it wasn't prayer hour. The others were asleep, yet someone stood above me, silhouette trembling. It was Sister Miriam. She held a bundle of feathers in her hands. Me feathers, burnt gray, stained red. She gathered them, every single one I thought I'd hidden beneath floorboards and folded linens. Her lips moved, but her voice wasn't hers. You are not Alina. You are not his. You are the gate they closed in flesh. I couldn't move. My limbs were lead, my throat tight. She pressed the feathers to my chest and lit the match. The flame kissed the tips, but instead of smoke, there was screaming. Not from me, from the feathers, from him. Images poured into my skull, wings flayed open. I sewn shut, a kiss taken on a battlefield soaked in angel's marrow. And my voice, me other voice crying out not in fear, but defiance. Sister Miriam recoiled, her hands blistered, flesh bubbling like wax. She dropped the bundle. The flames died the moment they hit the stone floor, smothered by a force unseen. I sat her day up, suddenly able to breathe again. My nightdress was untouched, but my chest burned, as if something inside me had awakened and hated to be disturbed. She whispered, "Forgive me, but I don't think it was for me." She turned to run, but the chapel doors burst open, and Mother Priscilla stood there, robes blacker than usual, as hollowed by something more than age. "Miriam," she said, voice sharp as shattered stained glass. "You knew better than to wake her like that." Then she looked at me. "You remember too quickly. What am I?" I asked, voice shaking. She walked closer, looked down at the scorched feathers, and at my hands. "You're the fourth sin," she whispered. Then, to Miriam, "Prepare the chapel. Tonight, we do what the angels could not." I should have run. I should have prayed. But all I could do was stare at the feather now growing back from my palm. Alive. Episode 5. The bell that rang without a rope. They told us the chapel bell could only be rung by the hand of the faithful. But that night, it rang by itself 3 times. No one touched it. No rope pulled. No one howled through the rafters. And yet the iron tongue of Saint Elisha's bell swung with fury, sending shockwaves through the convent like judgment had come early. I was in the chapel when it began kneeling, pretending to pray, though every word I whispered turned to ash on my tongue. Sister Miriam stood beside me, her bandaged hands trembling with each toll. Mother Priscilla's voice cracked the silence. "She's wicking them." She meant me, or perhaps the angel inside me. I looked up. The stained glass saints above the altar had changed. Their eyes, once downcast in sorrow, now stared straight ahead, not at Christ, at me. The bell rang a 4th time. The crucifix above the altar cracked. From the ceiling, flakes of plaster rained down like holy snow, and the shadows around the tabernacle twisted into shapes I could almost recognize. Hewings, broken and twitching, a body nailed to more than just wood. I rose. A force moved through me. Not possession, not grace, something else. A return. The floor trembled. Candles flickered. And outside, the cemetery moaned with the voices of saints who never made it past the veil. I walked toward the bell tower, past the trembling sisters, past the holy water that boiled at my feet. When I touched the iron gate, it opened and creaked, not groaned opened, like a mouth welcoming home a secret it had been forced to forget. At the top, the bell swung violently, but there was no rope, no mechanism, just a single feather caught in the gears. I reached for it, and then I heard his voice in it in a dream, not in memory, but in the air around me, trembling through the stones. That bell was wrong the day I fell, and now it rings again for you. The feather dissolved in my hand, and below me, the chapel doors burst open. They were coming, not the nuns, not the priests, but the ones who remembered me before I was born. Episode 6, The Choir That Sang in Reverse. It started with a hum, low, off-key, like a lullaby sung by someone who had forgotten what comfort was. I was in the east wing, where the air always smelled of damp stone and unopened tombs. That night, it felt colder than usual, like the walls were exhaling the past. And then came the singing, soft at first, like murmured prayers slipping through cracked lips. But it didn't rise, it descended, and the notes, they weren't right. They moved backward, a hymn unsung in reverse, peeling itself apart note by note, Latin twisted into moans, amen unraveling into name. I followed the sound, barefoot on marble. The choir hall had been closed for years, sealed after the fire that took 7 novices and left the stained glass window, scored with the imprint of an open mouth screaming. But the doors were open now. Inside, the pews were empty, except they weren't. Figures lined the benches, shrouded, motionless, mouths agape, yet no breath moved their robes. Their song continued backward, broken, divine, and in the front row Saturday a girl in white. Me. I stared at my reflection. Her hands were folded in prayer, but her eyes bled black. She sang with them, and when I stepped closer, they all turned. At once, their mouths moved in perfect unison. You remembered a name that was meant to be buried. Now we remember you. The stained glass window behind the altar shattered inward. A wind swept through, though no storm raged outside. Candles burned blue, shadows bowed. Then the real choir entered. Sister Miriam, Mother Priscilla, and 3 others I did not know. Their mouths opened, and from them came fire, not song. I dropped to my knees, but it was not in fear. It was recognition, because I could hear his voice threading through the reverse hymn, singing not to me, but through me. They erased our verse from the gospel, but it still echoes in your bones. The ghost choir faded, my reflection remained, and she smiled. Episode 7, The Psalm That Opened a Grave. It happened during the vigil for St. Jude, the patron of lost causes. We gathered in the cemetery chapel, cloaked in silence, holding flickering candles like fragile truths. The hymn books were old, spines cracked, pages thin as skin. I opened mine and frowned. See, the psalm on page 77 wasn't part of the liturgy. It wasn't even in Latin. It was written in a language I shouldn't have known. Curved symbols like wings in descent, loops that wept ink onto the yellow page. And yet, I understood every word. My lips moved before I gave them permission. He who falls for love shall rise in wrath. Beneath this earth sleeps the truth unspoken. The candles flared blue. The stone beneath my knees groaned. A low rumble slithered through the floor, like something ancient turning over in its sleep. Sister Miriam grabbed my arm, but it was too late. I finished the verse. The ground cracked, and one of the graves split open, not with violence, with reverence. The soil parted like water around a memory long buried. A coffin rose and it lifted, but welcomed upward, and carved into its lid wasn't a name, but a question. Why do angels weep in dreams? No one else saw it, not the way I did. They screamed, crossed themselves. But I stepped forward. The lid opened. Inside was a mirror, and not just any reflection. Minute, unburnt, eyes glowing with gold, skin marked with sigils I recognized from the feathers. Behind me stood him, not fallen, not bleeding, smiling. They buried our covenant beneath stone, but stone remembers. I touched the glass, and it cracked in it from pressure, but recognition, and beneath it lay a scroll. I took it, The moment I did, every candle in the chapel died, but I could still see, because my eyes had begun to glow. Episode 8, The Scroll That Whispers When Burned. They tried to take it from me. A scroll. Mother Priscilla ordered it seized at dawn. She said relics that don't bear the church's seal are to be cast into cleansing flame. But even the sisters she sent looked afraid of me. I didn't fight when they bound my hands. I didn't need to. The scroll had already awakened. They laid it on the pyre in the courtyard. A pit of sacred coals roared, surrounded by 7 nuns chanting in tongues no priest ever taught. They dropped the parchment into the fire and waited for it to turn to ash. It didn't. Instead, it spoke, in a voice like when scraping cathedral glass. I remember. Do you? Flames twisted, rose in columns, then bent backward as if bowing. The scroll pulsed with light from inside the fire, then began to burn out in destruction. But in revelation, ink rose from its surface like smoke and reformed in the air above it, shaping words that no one else could read, but I could. Sin is only silence denied its echo. I felt something move beneath my skin. My hands tore free without force. The ropes melted like wax. I walked through the ring of sisters, their eyes wide, their mouths locked in mid-prayer, as if time forgot them. The fire split as I stepped into it. No heat, no pain, just light. The scroll hovered in the flame. Untouched, I reached out, and when I touched it, my veins lit up with a language I had never spoken in this life. But in another, I had written it. A memory returned, a night sky without stars, a kiss exchanged beneath a falling angel, a promise burned into the skin of my back before I even had a name. When I emerged, the sisters were on their knees, not in worship, in terror. Mother Priscilla's voice trembled. It is not she who remembers the angel. It is the angel who remembers her. I looked up at the sky, and something looked back. Episode 9. The wound that glowed beneath the habit. They thought the fire was the end of it, but that night, beneath my habit, something began to pulse. I felt it first in the silence between prayers. Beneath skin, a warmth that didn't burn, but pulsed like a heartbeat too old for this body. I lifted my robe and saw it. It marked just below my ribs. Not a bruise, not a scar, a sigil. It glowed faintly, like dying embers, and then it breathed. Each time I inhaled, it shimmered brighter. When I touched it, a memory spilled out, not a thought, but a sensation when it crossed wings. Blood in the mouth, a voice sobbing my name, not in pain, but in worship. I collapsed. Sister Miriam found me curled on the floor of the chapel, my habit soaked in light. She gasped, fell to her knees. It's not a wound, she whispered, eyes wide. It's a seal, and it's breaking. She helped me up, but her hands trembled. We need to hide it before she sees. She met Mother Priscilla. Too late. The chapel doors creaked open. The candlelight behind her made her look less like a woman and more like judgment walking. Her gaze fell to my side, and she smiled. She said, so the 5th sin has awakened. Miriam stepped forward. She didn't summon it. It's remembering her. Mother Priscilla turned her back. Then it is time she sees the place where the first wound was carved. They took me through a tunnel hidden beneath the convento rota and ruin. Task bones that still hummed with psalms. At the end stood a door made of stone and silence. Mother Priscilla placed my hand upon it. The sigil on my side burned through my habit. That door opened, and beyond it was not a room, but a memory made flesh. A cathedral with no roof, a sky that wept ash, and a throne of feathers soaked in holy blood. And there, carved into the marble floor, was the same mark glowing on my side, waiting for me to kneel. Episode 10. The throne that was built from fallen wings. It didn't feel like kneeling. It felt like remembering how to kneel. As my knees touched the marble floor beneath the open sky of memory, something shifted in the air. Not wind crescents. The throne before me was not gold, not stone, but feathers withered, charred, and still trembling. The remnants of angels, held like a monument to defiance. Some were white, some black, all broken, and on the highest wing Saturday no one. Until I blinked, he was there, the one from my dreams, the angel whose voice braided itself into my thoughts. His Saturday in silence, wings folded like shame behind his back. His eyes met mine and bled light. You've come farther than they ever wanted you to. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My tongue was heavy with awe or memory. He stepped down from the throne. His bare feet left streaks of light with every step, and when he reached me, he didn't touch me. He knelt. You bore the seal, he said, but I bore the fall. He opened his palm. There, burned into the skin, was the same sigil that lived on my side. They told you I fell for pride. He whispered, but it was never pride. It was you. The cathedral trembled. Above us, the ash-clouded sky pulsed like lungs exhaling judgment. This throne was built from the wings of those who chose love over law, he said, and I was the first to be crowned by exile. I touched his hand, and the feathers rose. All around the cathedral, they began to lift, floating in spirals, glowing softly. A wind stirred that had no source, only purpose. I felt the throne breathe, and then I heard the voices, not the nuns, not the dead, but the angels who had fallen before him. She has returned, they sang. The sin that remembered, the angel before me looked up. They will come for you now, not to silence you, but to beg forgiveness. He took my hand, but first, you must remember the sixth sin. Episode 11. The sixth sin was not a betrayal, it was a choice. I thought the sixth sin would be a memory of ruin, but it was a choice, mine, and I was making it again. The angel stood before me, hand still in mine, but his voice was distant now, as if what came next had to be remembered alone. Around us, the throne of wings held its breath. I closed my eyes, and the memory found me. A different time, a different sky. I stood at the gates of heaven, not as Alina, not as a virgin, but as her, the one without name, because the name was stripped when the Gospels were rewritten, the one who was offered eternity at a cost. The seraphim stood in a circle of fire. The voice of God was not thunder, it was stillness, and in that stillness, I heard, choose. I looked at the angel, the same one who stood before me now, though brighter than, unburned, hallowed in flame and grace. He had knelt before heaven, and then knelt before me. If you stay, he said, we remain perfect, but if you go, I will follow. They said no angel had ever loved a mortal before, but I wasn't mortal yet. I chose to fall. Not because I doubted God, but because I believed in love more than law. That was the sixth sin, not rebellion, not pride, faith in a different kind of salvation. When I opened my eyes, I was crying, and so was he. He whispered, you remembered, and then the sky above the cathedral tore open up with light, but with wings, thousands, flame, not from punishment, but from freedom. Others are choosing, he said, voice trembling. Because you did first. The sixth sin wasn't a crime, it was a door, and it had just been opened. Episode 12. The heaven that begged to forget her. It wasn't rage that stirred the skies, it was fear. The veil between the mortal and the divine thinned, and heaven did not descend, it recoiled. A silence swept across the convent, across the earth itself. Trees frowned, seemed rustle, birds hung in the air like forgotten prayers, and in the stillness above the cathedral, heaven blinked and remembered me. I felt it not in fire, nor thunder, but in the ache between my ribs, as if God himself held his breath. The angel beside me knelt once more, not in reverence, in grief. They remember now, he whispered, and from the torn sky, I heard them, the choir of thrones, the virtues, the silent ones, singing backwards, the same hymn I had heard in the ruined choir room, but now slower and sadder. They were not singing in worship, they were singing to forget. Erase her, erase her, erase. But memory, once returned, cannot be buried again. And I stood tall as they sang, as the heavens wept light, as the stars blinked out one by one like ashamed witnesses. I lifted my hand, the sigil on my side glowed. The throne of feathers behind me rose into flame, not of wrath, but revelation. You cast me out, I said aloud, though my voice came from deeper than breath, not because I sinned, but because I loved. And in that moment, heaven trembled, not because it could destroy me, but because it knew it already tried, and failed. Behind me, the fallen gathered, not damned, not broken, free. The angel beside me took my hand again. The gospel ends here, unless you write a new one. I looked at the sky one last time, and I did not pray. I remembered. Episode 13. The gospel that was written in her blood. There are gospels the church canonized, There are gospels, the heretics whispered, and then there is the one heaven bled to bury. It was not ink that recorded it, not parchment that held it, but the body mean. They came at midnight, not angels, not men, but something between, wrapped in torn vestments. I stitched shut with rosary wire, mouths gagged with scripture. They called themselves the Rememberers, and their task was not to kill me. It was to erase me. Let the blood that opened the gate seal it. Their leader intoned, lifting a blade shaped like a broken crucifix. But before he struck, the mark on my side flared, and I bled, not from the wound. From memory, the blood that poured from me did not stain the floor. It etched symbols ancient, divine, forbidden, the very language of the first covenant, the one made in secret, the one God was afraid would be remembered. The ground trembled. From the cracks rose wings down seams. Hundreds, fallen, free, no longer hiding in shadow. They circled me, their chant soft, mournful. One stepped forward, the angel who had loved me before time was counted. Your blood carries what they tried to silence. He said, let it speak. And so it did. The symbols burned into the stone floor, crawling outward like fire finding truth. And the convention altar, that chapel, even the cemetery beyond it began to shake. A voice thundered it from above. From within, write it. So I did, with every drop that fell, with every memory awakened. I wrote the gospel that was mine, not of commandments, not of punishment, but of love, of choice, of the sin that saved more than it damned. And when the final word pulsed red against the earth, the sky did not open, it bowed. The rememberers fell to their knees, not in victory, but in surrender. And heaven, at last, stayed silent, because now the gospel lived again, and this time, it could not be forgotten.